At 28, I was a corporate insurance investigator, and I thought the scariest thing in my job was catching arsonists who burned their own restaurants for the payout. Then last March, 6 months pregnant with my daughter, I went looking for my phone charger in my husband's home office at 11 at night and found a folder on his desktop labeled with my daughter's due date. I almost didn't open it. That's the part that still keeps me up, how close I came to just grabbing the charger and walking away. But I'd spent 4 years reading people's lies for a living, and something about a folder named after a baby who didn't exist yet made the hair on my arms stand up. Inside was a private adoption agreement. Not for our baby. For someone else's. My name is Maddie, my husband's name is Cole, and at the time I found that folder, I believed he was a mid-level project manager at his stepfather's construction firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. A man who fell asleep on the couch most nights with ESPN on, and who'd cried, actually cried, when we saw our daughter's heartbeat for the first time. I want you to understand that before everything else, because what I'm about to tell you only makes sense if you know how good he was at being someone I loved. The agreement was between Cole and a private adoption attorney in Raleigh on behalf of his half-sister Brittany and her husband, Doug. Brittany was 34, had been through 3 rounds of IVF that all failed, and Doug came from old textile money, the kind of North Carolina family with a name on a hospital wing and a clause in their family trust that meant Doug couldn't fully inherit unless he had what the trust literally called a natural or legally adopted bloodline heir before his 40th birthday, which was 11 months away. The document wasn't for a stranger's baby. The biological mother listed was Joelle, a 22-year-old woman 6 months pregnant, currently living in a rented duplex Cole was paying for under the name of an LLC I had never heard of. I sat in his leather desk chair with my hand on my own stomach and read that contract twice, and on the second read I understood the part that made my mouth go dry. There was a clause about concurrent pregnancies providing optimal medical cover, and underneath it, in Cole's own handwriting in the margin, a note: M won't suspect timing if scheduled around her own delivery. M was me. I am not someone who screams. I didn't throw anything, I didn't wake him up, I didn't even cry that night, not really. What I did was close the laptop exactly the way I found it, walk back to bed, and lie there next to my husband while my brain did the thing it does best. It started building a case file. Because here's what I want you to understand about me before this story keeps going. I'd spent 4 years sitting across from people who lied to insurance adjusters for a living, and I knew the first rule of catching a liar. You never let them know you're onto them until you have everything. Panic gets you nothing. Patience gets you a conviction. So I smiled the next morning. I let Cole kiss my forehead and rub my belly, and tell me he had a site visit that weekend that would keep him out late. I told him to drive safe. Sunday dinner with his family was 3 days later, and I'd never paid close enough attention to the way they all talked around each other until I knew what to listen for. His mother, Pam, hosted these things at her house in a gated golf community outside Charlotte, the kind of place where every lawn looked like it had been ironed. Pam had married into a little money through her second husband, Cole's stepfather, who owned the construction firm, and she wore it like a costume that didn't quite fit. Gold bracelets stacked up one arm, a kitchen island the size of my first apartment. Brittany and Doug were already there when we walked in, and Brittany hugged me first, both arms around my belly before she even looked at my face. "Look at you," she said, and there was something in her voice I'd have missed 3 days earlier, a hunger almost. Doug stood by the wine fridge in a quarter-zip sweater that probably cost more than my car payment, swirling a glass of something he didn't seem to actually want to drink, watching me the way you'd watch a stock ticker. We sat down to a table of roast chicken and green beans almondine, and Doug brought up the trust, within 10 minutes, the way rich people do when they want you to know they have one. "My father's lawyers are finally wrapping up the paperwork on the transition," he said, looking at Brittany, not me. "Once it's official, we'll be looking at some real changes." "Won't be long now," Pam said, and reached over to pat Brittany's hand. "Won't be long at all." Cole cut into his chicken without looking up. "Good things take time. You'll get there." I sat at the end of the table. I noticed for the first time that I always sat at the end, furthest from Pam, while Brittany sat right beside her, and I asked, in the most harmless voice I could manage, whether trusts like that usually required a lot of legal documentation when an heir came along. Doug's jaw tightened just slightly. "We have our own family attorneys for that," he said. "We don't need outsiders poking around." "Of course," I said. "I just know from claims work that the paperwork around inheritances gets messy fast. People get desperate. They cut corners." The table went quiet enough that I could hear the ice in Doug's glass. Pam's smile didn't move, but her eyes did. "We don't really do shop talk at dinner, Maddie," she said. "Let's keep things pleasant," I apologized sweetly. I told them I just found human behavior fascinating, occupational hazard. Cole gave me a look across the table, a warning, dressed up as concern, and I smiled back at him like I had no idea I'd just rattled the cage. Later, while Pam was cutting a pound cake in the kitchen, Brittany sat next to me on the couch, suddenly tearful, telling me how hard the last 3 years had been, how she just wanted to be a mother, how seeing me pregnant reminded her of everything she'd lost. It would have broken my heart a week earlier. Now I just watched her cry and thought about a duplex with Cole's name on the lease, and a 22-year-old named Joelle inside it. Doug, 2 glasses of wine in by the time we left, walked me out to the car while Cole grabbed leftovers from Pam. He leaned against the door before I could get in, close enough that I could smell the wine on him. "You're doing a real service for this family," he said low, like it was a compliment. "More than you even know." "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice soft and a little confused. He smiled, the kind of smile rich men give you when they think you're too dumb to understand what they're really saying. "Let's just say the timing's gonna work out perfect for everybody." Cole came around the corner just then and practically yanked Doug back by the shoulder, hissing something at him I couldn't hear, and Doug laughed it off, called himself drunk. But I'd heard enough. I had what I needed in my own memory, if nowhere else, and I made a note the second I got home. That night, after Cole fell asleep, I went back into his office and did what I do for a living, except this time the fraud was mine to catch. I'd installed a small keylogger app on our shared home network months earlier, back when I'd first noticed he was being cagey about a side project, and I'd never bothered to check it because I trusted him. I checked it that night. It took me 2 hours to build the full picture. Cole's construction business, which I'd believed was thriving under his stepfather's company, was actually $380,000 in debt to a private lender with terms that read like something out of a loan shark movie, 18% interest compounding monthly. Personal guarantees that put our house and my retirement account on the hook. He'd forged my signature on one of the guarantee documents. I sat there with my hand pressed against my mouth, staring at my own name in handwriting that wasn't mine. And there it was, the missing piece. Doug had offered Cole $300,000 to facilitate the adoption. Cole's word for it in a text thread with the Raleigh attorney. Not Joelle's word, not anyone's but his. Joelle herself, I learned scrolling through emails, had been promised $40,000 and her duplex paid through the birth, in exchange for placing her baby directly with Brittany and Doug through a private arrangement Cole had set up to look on paper like an independent adoption. Nothing connecting it to him at all, except that he was the one paying her rent and the one collecting the rest. What chilled me wasn't even the money. It was a single email from the adoption attorney, 3 lines long, that mentioned concurrent due dates create useful cover for travel and absences, followed by Cole's reply. "Makes sense. M is due the same week, easy to explain why I'm in and out of town." He wasn't just helping his sister buy a baby, he was using my pregnancy, my due date, my own body as a smokescreen. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in his office chair with my hands on my stomach and made myself a promise. I wasn't going to be the woman who found out too late. I was going to build a file so airtight that by the time anyone in that family realized I knew anything, it would already be over. The next morning, I called my college roommate's husband, Reyes, who'd left the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department 2 years earlier to do private investigation work. I trusted him, and more importantly, I trusted his discretion. I told him everything in 15 minutes flat, the way I'd give a deposition. He went quiet for a second and then said, "Maddie, this isn't a custody thing, this sounds like baby selling. That's a federal and state issue both." I told him I knew. I asked him to put eyes on the duplex and on Joelle, gently. I didn't want her treated like a criminal because in my gut I already suspected she was as much a target as I was, just a poorer one. For the next 10 days I played the most exhausting role of my life. I let Cole rub my feet. I let him pick out a crib with me at the furniture store, run his hand over the wood like he actually cared what our daughter's room would look like. I went to the obstetrician with him and smiled when he held my hand during the ultrasound, even though every cell in my body wanted to ask the doctor to check me for a tracking device, because I genuinely no longer trusted that this man saw me as anything but a calendar he was using to time a crime. Reyes's reports started coming in. Photos of Joelle leaving a clinic that, it turned out, wasn't her regular OB. It was a private practice run by a doctor named Whitfield, who Reyes discovered through a contact at the state medical board, had a quiet history. 8 years earlier, a malpractice complaint had been filed and settled out of court by a young mother who claimed she was never shown her stillborn baby's body. The case vanished under an NDA. I read the settlement summary Reyes sent me and felt something in my chest go cold and very, very still. I didn't understand yet exactly how Whitfield fit into Cole's plan with Joelle, since her arrangement was framed as a voluntary adoption, not a fraud against me directly. But 3 days later I understood, because Pam showed up at my house unannounced with a Tupperware of soup and a bottle of prenatal vitamins. She said Cole had picked up from the doctor. "They're not the ones from your OB," she said, setting the orange bottle on my kitchen counter. No label. Just a strip of masking tape with an M written on it in Sharpie. "Whitfield's a friend of the family, very thorough. Cole wanted to make sure you're getting the right minerals this late in the pregnancy." She unscrewed the cap, tapped one thick white pill onto a napkin, and stood there with her arms crossed until I picked it up. I am not a careless person. Doctors do not send unmarked pills home through husbands and mothers-in-law. I knew that the moment I held it. But I also knew that refusing, right there in my kitchen, with Pam watching me like a hawk, would blow up every ounce of leverage I'd spent 2 weeks building. So I thanked her. I told her I'd take it with lunch. The second her car pulled out of the driveway, I bagged the pill and drove it straight to a lab Reyes used for contested claims toxicology. A courtesy he called in for me the same day. The results came back 48 hours later, a compounded dose of misoprostol used off-label to induce labor, not a vitamin. A trigger. I sat in my car in the lab's parking lot and cried for the first time since this whole thing started. Not from fear, but from a kind of fury I didn't have words for yet. They weren't just stealing a baby from a scared 22-year-old across town. They were trying to put me into early labor on a schedule that worked for them, using my own mother-in-law as the delivery system. I flushed every pill in that bottle and refilled it with generic calcium tablets from CVS, identical in size, and for the next week I took my vitamins every single day in front of Pam with a smile on my face, while she watched, satisfied, thinking she was slowly nudging my body toward an early delivery she'd somehow convinced herself was a kindness. Reyes wired 3 pinhole cameras through our house while Cole was at the site. One in a bookshelf, one in a kitchen plant, one in the smoke detector over the living room couch, and 2 nights later, I had Cole and Pam on tape, glasses of wine in hand. Cole saying the words, "She's due basically the same week as Joelle, it's perfect, nobody connects the dots," and Pam laughing and saying it was such a blessing things worked out this way for the family. The baby shower for me was scheduled at Pam's club that Saturday, an event I'd tried to cancel twice and Cole had insisted we keep, because, he said, it would look strange to cancel something so important. I understood by then that he just needed the illusion intact a little longer. I wore a soft yellow dress, taped a thin wireless mic Reyes gave me flat against my sternum under the fabric, and walked into that country club ballroom like a woman with absolutely nothing to hide. Brittany hovered near me most of the afternoon in a way that 2 weeks earlier I'd have read as sisterly affection. Now I watched her eyes track every gift, every onesie, with something closer to grief than joy, and for one unguarded second I actually felt for her. Until Doug, 3 bourbons deep by 4 o'clock, wandered over while Cole and Pam were across the room taking photos, put his hand flat on my stomach without asking. "You're carrying a lot for this family," he said, leaning in close enough that I could smell the alcohol. "Funny how it's all timing out so perfect, huh? You and the Burnham line both coming through right when we need it." "What do you mean, Doug?" I asked, keeping my voice small and confused, my heart hammering against the mic taped to my chest. He laughed, low and loose. "Don't worry your head about it, sweetheart. Just stay healthy. My whole inheritance is riding on babies coming on schedule this year, one way or another." Cole spotted us and crossed the room fast, pulling Doug back by the arm, hissing something about him being drunk, but it didn't matter anymore. I had it. Clean, recorded, unmistakable. I went into actual early labor 4 days later, not faked, not staged. My body simply decided it was time, 3 weeks ahead of my due date, the same week Joelle was due to deliver across town. Cole panicked in a way that told me everything. He didn't call my OB. He called Whitfield's office first, said something into the phone about the timeline, and only called my actual doctor 12 minutes later, after I demanded it, after I refused to get in the car until he did. We went to the hospital I was supposed to deliver at, my real OB, my real records, but Cole hovered the entire time, checking his phone, stepping out twice for calls he wouldn't explain. I had already sent Reyes and the report I'd compiled, the loan documents, the forged signature, the misoprostol lab results, the camera footage, the recording from the shower, to a contact Reyes had at the FBI's Charlotte field office 2 days earlier. The moment my contractions started close enough together that I knew this story was about to collide with whatever Cole had planned for Joelle. My daughter was born at 6:14 in the morning, healthy, loud, perfect. Cole was holding her, crying real tears this time, when 2 agents and a Mecklenburg County detective walked into the maternity ward and asked him to step into the hallway. I learned the rest later, piece by piece, the way you learn the parts of a car crash you didn't see happen. Joelle had gone into labor that same night, 3 miles away, and agents were already at Whitfield's private clinic when her water broke, because my evidence had given them enough for an emergency warrant the day before. Whitfield was arrested mid-shift. Joelle delivered her son safely in a real hospital, with her own name on his birth certificate, and was connected through victim services to a fund that ended up covering both her and the baby for the next year. She kept him. That part still makes me cry in the good way. Doug was charged with conspiracy related to an illegal private adoption arrangement and attempted falsification of medical records. The Trust's board of directors, once the news broke, moved within a week to strip him of any future claim, citing a morality clause buried in the same document he'd been so proud of. Brittany was never charged. There wasn't enough to prove she knew the full scope of what her husband and brother had arranged, though I have my own opinion about that, and it isn't a kind one. Pam pleaded out to a lesser charge tied to the misoprostol, enough for 2 years probation, no jail. Cole took the hardest fall: fraud, forgery, conspiracy. He's serving 6 years. I left him the day the agents walked him out of that hallway, and I didn't cry doing it. I live in a small rental house now, just me and my daughter, paid for with my own paycheck, which feels like the most ordinary, unremarkable fact in the world, and also like the proudest thing I've ever said out loud. I still do claims work. I'm better at my job now than I ever was before, if I'm honest, because I learned the hardest way possible that the people closest to you can build a fraud right under your nose if you let love make you stop asking questions. My daughter is 8 months old. She has Cole's eyes and absolutely none of his secrets, and some nights when I rock her to sleep, I think about Joelle doing the same thing 3 miles away from where it all happened, neither of us knowing the other's name until a courtroom put us in the same room. We talk sometimes now. I think we needed each other, in a strange way, to believe any of it was real. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust easily again, but I trust myself completely now, and that turned out to be the thing that mattered most. If someone you love makes you feel crazy for asking questions, ask louder. Don't apologize for noticing. The people who have nothing to hide never mind being looked at closely, only the ones who do.